Do you idolize Gandhi
I
and his
do.
principle?
I do.
You know what Winston Churchill, the then Prime Minister of UK, former Prime Minister of UK, said? He said Gandhi was the best Indian leader we wanted
Mm.
because he was serving the British. Reason being, his non-violent methods were very easy for us to deal with because we didn't face any confrontation, we didn't face any any mistakes, let's say any troubles in handling India. He said it was Subhash Chandra Bose who was a pain in the ass for us because his 50,000 soldiers had died protecting India, fighting for India. So he said he was the biggest burden on our minds. And Gandhi, he actually laughed on Gandhi while he was giving tribute. Gandhi, he's our own man. He was like this. Gandhi was the biggest support we had for us. This was his approach because he was saying Gandhi, no issues. Like he's nobody, he's nothing. And today we idolize Gandhi. So I'm not saying I'm against Gandhi. I love his principles. To be very honest, he had great unwavering principles which I do respect. But do you think at times in the present practical times of this world, these principles, like I've not seen any country being independent just because of sheer non-violence. It was not Gandhi who independent India. It was Subhash Chandra Bose. It was Bhagat Singh. They gave up their lives. Gandhi was like, I cannot do anything. I will just be non-violent. The oppressor will just oppress you more if you don't say anything. I think there has to be a stage where the oppressor can come back to his senses. Once that stage is gone, it is impossible. This is what I believe. What's your thought on this?
Firstly, you're quoting a man who himself was such a violent man,
Yes, I do. I do know.
the Prime Minister. Churchill was responsible for the destruction of UK after the Second World
Yes.
War. And you're quoting such a person. That too,
Yeah. Yes.
ab mera suno.
Yeah,
Sure,
right,
sure,
right,
sure.
right,
You
sir,
can
right.
give.
So you're quoting such a man to talk about Gandhi ji. है ना, ये देख रहा हूँ. देखो देखो देखो
But this is
for
the type of world we are living in.
This is what we're living in. This is what I'm trying to say.
but we don't want to live in this world, this kind of world. नहीं तो आज पुतिन है, कल कोई और आएगा.
Exactly.
But how do you want to, how much you want to fight? That's what I'm saying. We need a way out, and Gandhi was one such possibility. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama is one such a personality that is giving the world another alternative. Every time, if there is a Churchill, there was a Gandhi. If there is Xi Jinping, there is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. हमको ये देखना है कि दुनिया को क्या चाहिए. ये बैठ के ये बोल के मत बैठना कि पूरी दुनिया ऐसा है. So
No,
we need
yeah. There's a balance.
So therefore, अब ये देखो. If so, firstly, Indian freedom struggle had happened not because of one person or two people or one ideology. It was a composite freedom movement. एक revolution था. किसी ने अंबेडकर की एक ऐसा रास्ता दिया जिससे समुदाय की the community from within India, there was a liberation. Subhash Chandra Bose led a different kind of a revolution. So was Bhagat Singh, and then also Gandhi. But if we were to be led by only Gandhi, so that kind of it's an extreme to think of a freedom struggle led by one person. First. So therefore, I'm saying the Indian freedom struggle was led by different people, and different people also got involved in it. And what we achieved at the end of the day was this freedom movement that we inherit today. And how we fought for freedom at the time is what we are seeing today. If Churchill had faced a military backlash, looking at what Subhash Chandra Bose had done on him, and if he feared, he had his own reasons to fear. But what I think Gandhiji has achieved was his methods of non-violence has firstly decolonized the mind of the Indian to think that it is not the supremacy of the white people and their culture. It is our culture based on yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedas. Giving respect to that, it gave the Indian people a new sense of dignity and recognition and a culture and identity that decolonized the Indian minds. So and that too, and in the political activism with which Gandhiji led the freedom movement, this has a huge legacy, and this has, I would say, this was one of the biggest effects with which the Indian people led the country into freedom. There was a point of time where Gandhiji said, how can 60,000 British officers rule over 600 million Indians? That was the number.
Yeah.
So you see, this number was what he was telling the Indian population psychologically about number, is not because the 60,000 British officers were powerful militarily, but because we were enamored by British culture, language, and the image they have created. Yeah. So this decolonization of Indian people's mind gave Indian people a new force. So I think that has become the new identity to the Indian people, that even today, last year in the Republic Day speech, Modi ji was talking about decolonizing the country, our mind, our language, and different things. It is still going on, but Gandhiji was doing it at that time. So I think this was not only a success in the way India became free and independent, but also a long legacy that Gandhiji left in the mind of people, and that too of non-violence. Gandhiji's efforts in teaching, practicing non-violence is not just feeling non-violent at the in our hearts, and not just not wishing harm and hurt to others, but how to strategically use it in a freedom movement. That, I think, Gandhiji has created an unprecedented example by intertwining that in political activism.
So we'll end this topic on this last question. So you told ki Indian freedom movement was not just led by one person.
Yes.
So you follow Gandhiji's ideology, His Holiness Dalai Lama's ideology, which are based on non-violence. So do you think Tibet needs someone with an ideology of Subhash Chandra Bose as well? When you two will combine, you might reach your goal.
I cannot think of someone who would lead a military movement in the Tibetan freedom movement. I think we are all so enamored by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the exemplary non-violent freedom struggle he's leading. He's leading the Tibetan community, and this legacy is so powerful, and it leaves no space for any militancy.
I will just say one story. I'm not contradicting you. I'm not questioning you. I will just state the facts. Nothing more than that. Although I really love these principles, I do love and I want the world to work this way only. I don't want any violence in any forms, right? But how long did it take for US to achieve its independence? We suffered for 200 years. They became independent only in 3 days. The US against UK. That all of the 13 American colonies united themselves together, and they fought the British, and they declared themselves independent. They didn't say, "Oh, the Britishers, we are so loving people. We are non-violent. We are great at heart. Please let us go. Please give us. Please have mercy on us, and please let us live our independent lives freely." They didn't say those things to the Britishers. They fought and they kicked the Britishers out. And in just 3 days, and they fought the British for the next 11 years. At the time, America was already independent. This is what I'm trying to say. Like, you can influence your philosophies are great, but do you think for a country to achieve independence, these philosophy can work at the same country level independence? Like, can you have these philosophies for up to that extent of independing a country with keeping the main goal of mind, the main goal in mind of freeing Tibet?
Because I've been to jail many times.
Yes.
And sometimes within the jail among prisoners we often discuss हम यहाँ से कैसे भाग सकते हैं. तो कोई बोलते कि हम उसको जेलर या किन लोगों को मारते हैं हम भाग जाएंगे. लेकिन सबके मन में ये होता है कि क्या उनको मारने से आपका आज़ादी मिल जाएगा? और and even if you are able to do, is it worth? Because you can kill someone and you can go out and आप आज़ादी से आप उस आज़ादी को मज़े में रह पाएंगे. Would you be able to enjoy the freedom you have won by killing someone?
Right, you have raised a very great point.
So here, it is not the insistence of becoming independent at all cost. What we are fighting for is freedom now as we lead the movement and also in future. Independence of Tibet is not just raising the flag of Tibet and kicking the Chinese out of Tibet. Independence of Tibet, as how Tibetan Buddhists, how we think, is even now, can we lead a freedom movement where we don't have to hate our enemy, where we have to go to a point that we go out to kill them to win our freedom? Then we have already lost our freedom internally by killing the enemy. Then even after that, if we have raised the flag, where is the freedom? We have all lost our conscience. We have all lost our humanity. Is that worth of the freedom that we want to achieve? I don't think so. Therefore, in the case of Tibetan freedom movement, even in the recent 10-15 years, 157 Tibetans have burnt themselves in self-immolations for the freedom of Tibet. They are saying, we can give our life, but we will not take another's. We believe that for our freedom, we have no right to take someone else's freedom. However angry that person may be, however brutal that person may be, we have no right to take someone else's life. So therefore, Tibetan freedom movement is becoming an example to the rest of the world that here is a possible freedom movement based on the principles of love and compassion, where people are willing to give their life, willing to suffer 70 years or maybe even 100 years. But we are not willing to take someone else's life for our freedom. We are not willing to kill someone. We will give our lives. It's becoming this example, and this too led by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It may be there may be very little economical leverage in this or military leverage in this, but morally he is truly someone who is leading this path, exemplary path in the world where there is so much of violence, so much of hunger for out of greed. In this, the Dalai Lama is leading a movement based on the principle of love and compassion. And we believe that this is a freedom struggle where freedom is now and also in future.
So you have just opened a whole new space in my brain with your ideologies. Like it's really moving. Like
I will not say anything, but I will say I really hope you get like what you have in mind. Like I hope that desperately wish Tibet is free one day with your principles.
On that, I will say this. Okay, I would wish this freedom movement goes on. This is making us closer to our culture of love and compassion. Tomorrow, if Tibet becomes free and independent, then it will be more about welfare and equality and than our own personal rights. But this freedom movement, which is challenging us to the core, to a point that there is a danger that the Tibetan language and culture may face decimation. And yet the world is busy taking advantage of this instead of helping and supporting us. In such a crucial moment when our people are burning themselves to self-immolations, even then our belief, our unflinching belief in love and compassion stays. It makes more sense to us now than ever before.
Do Tibetan people follow the principles of being a conscientious objector? Like they will not raise arms, they will not pick up weapons, they will not kill anyone.
It's not that we have not done that. There was a point of time in, for example, in 1959, 1960, right up to 1971, when there was the CIA support to the freedom movement, there was a armed resistance movement. But that was because the Tibetan people had never seen the Chinese invasion. They had never understood what was happening to them. So largely more because we were unorganized, we were not prepared. So many different responses came from the Tibetan community, and that in itself had that kind of effect, because that gave Tibetan freedom movement a longevity at that time. Otherwise we could have been crushed. So it played its own role. The armed resistance movement played its own role. But once we came out of that armed resistance movement, it now makes sense for us today that we lead this kind of non-violent freedom movement.
Sir, you have been taken into preventive custody, arrested and jailed 16 times, you have said. So how did you not break in such moments and in such setbacks?
No, मैं बहुत रोया था, बहुत मारपीट भी खाए थे, बहुत फ्रस्ट्रेट भी हुए थे, but that made sense, and that gave me more strength, more courage to continue to do this, and every time do it in a better way. So ऐसा नहीं है कि I was not broken, ऐसा नहीं है कि I felt sad or broken.
How do you still strong?
So see, there was point of time in for example 2008. In 2008 there was the our march to Tibet, and there was a secret way where we were 60 of us trying to sneak into Tibet just 3 days before Beijing Olympics, and if we were successful, we should have been able to cross into Tibet border, across the Himalayan border from Himachal, and we were to plant ourselves in Tibet 3 days before the Olympics, and we were to announce it. But we all got arrested, beaten, taken to jail.
1,000 Tibetans went missing in Beijing Olympics.
No, so that's a different case inside Tibet.
Okay.
What I'm now telling you is how we were attempting to cross into Tibet from the Himalayan region and lodge ourselves inside to protest, and risking our lives. At the time I got arrested, I was jailed in Kulu, and it was very frustrating that for almost about 2 years we were planning to do this protest, go into Tibet, and just one day before the Olympics I was in jail, and I was not able to forgive myself. I sat on a fast, not eating food, not even drinking water. First day, second day, I went on for 5 days with no food, no water also. So usually in this, if you go on for the 7th day, you die. It came to a point where it was almost affecting my organs. So doctors, police, they forcibly took me to Mandi district hospital and took me to a corner room and physically fed me this IV glucose, and I went blank. And when I came back to conscience, I realized that half the bottle had already gone into my body. And I was still resisting. I was so harsh on myself. So you see that it is not the Indian police or is about what the Chinese were doing in Tibet. It's about how I was doing with myself, my level of resilience, how to make sense when you are too emotionally worked up. Yeah. So these are moments that help me to grow in the movement, as an activist.
So how do you think refugees living in India can get benefits from Indian government? How do you think it will help to improve their lives?
Yeah, I think this is a constant dialogue between the Tibetan refugees and the government of India. The government of India now understands that majority of the Tibetans today are born in India, so they are applicable for Indian citizenship. So in a way, the Constitution of India says that anyone who is born on Indian soil before 87, you are Indian citizen. So keeping that in mind, and also now that India officially does not look at China as Hindi chini bhai bhai, and looks at China as more kind of an adversary and also a security threat. So therefore, India may find help from the Tibetan refugees who are in touch with their brethren inside Tibet, and already Tibetan soldiers are already working with the Indian Army as part of the Special Frontier Force. So government of India, without having to declare that they are working with Tibetans, I think there are certain ways we could we could be in service of India's security, because for us India is our home today as refugees. So that is one, and two, we should look at Tibet not just as the occupied country. India should look at Tibet as a possible future free Tibet. And when Tibet becomes free and independent, we have to look at the entire Himalayan region, from Ladakh to Arunachal.
Actually,
almost about 4,000 kilometers of border, and most Indians have no idea how big Tibet is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got surprised when I was researching about Tibet. I found Tibet to be 2.5 million square kilometers.
True.
Khan, Amdo,
True,
Utang.
true,
I was
true.
surprised with this big it is.
The thing is, India's relationship with China started with Hindi chini bhai bhai. So therefore, India never told its population about Tibet, especially about the Himalayas. So people in India, their memory about China starts from 1962. 1962 से पहले हिमालय की पार क्या था किसी को कुछ पता नहीं है. Indian textbooks don't talk about this. None of the Indian media actually talk about this. So now is time for India to teach India's youth about the Himalayas, and especially the country that is behind the Himalayas, which is Tibet. And that is the country where Mount Kailash is. India's imagination of Mount Kailash as the abode of Lord Shiva. And sometimes jokingly I talk to my Indian friends and say to them, Shiva has been there for thousands of years, so Lord Shiva is a Tibetan. So
you have a very good point.
Yeah, नहीं अगर कोई एक देश में 1000 साल रहे तो वो तो उसी देश का नागरिक बनेगा ना.
Exactly.
हाँ, so Shiva is Tibetan. तो
he has acquired Indian citizenship maybe.
So no, so therefore अब हम exchange कर सकते हैं कि गुरुजी इंडियन बन गए, दलाई लामा इंडियन बन गए, तो शिवा Tibetan है. So anyway, jokes apart, but I think these two countries, Tibet and India, share their kind of unborderable relationship. Is a relationship of a culture and imagination. and that needs to be revived. What had happened sadly is because China attacked India from Tibetan region, now across the Himalayas, Indian people look at that as enemy border, but it used to be Tibet. हमारा भाईचारा का रिश्ता था, और all over Himalayas भारतीय पॉपुलेशन वो बॉर्डर काट के तिब्बत जाते थे, वहाँ के लोग यहाँ आते थे परिक्रमा के लिए, व्यापार के लिए, शादियाँ होते थे। ऐसा एक कल्चर था पूरी हिमालय में कि पता नहीं रहते कि बॉर्डर कहाँ से शुरू होता है, कहाँ से ख़त्म होता है। उत्तराखंड में जाओ, जौलजीबी, धारचूला, लिपुलेख, सब जगह में ऐसे थे कि वहाँ के what is called the tribal people, they have no sense of the border. वहाँ भी जाते थे, यहाँ भी आते थे। वो हमारा भाईचारा का रिश्ता है और वो फिर से कायम कर सकते हैं भविष्य में। But at the moment, what is needed to be told to Indian population is that it was a free and independent Tibet with whom India signed the McMahon Treaty, which made Arunachal Pradesh a part of India. यह तो इतिहास है। अगर तिब्बत को उस वक्त आजाद तिब्बत के रूप में नहीं देखा गया तो अरुणाचल इंडिया का भाग नहीं होगा ना। अरुणाचल became part of India because of the McMahon Treaty signed on 24th of March 1914, and later the similar agreement happened, and that made India legitimately, historically and documentationally that Arunachal Pradesh, which is 90,000 square kilometer of land, a part of India legally by having this kind of treaty with Tibet. But India खुद ये बोल रहे हैं कि वो तिब्बत चीन की हिस्सा है. So then how do you validate your control over Arunachal Pradesh? तो इंडिया को बोलना पड़ेगा कि कम से कम इतिहास में तो तिब्बत आजाद थे, उसके बाद चीन ने कब्जा किया, आज चीन के कंट्रोल में है, इतना तो बोलना पड़ेगा. वो अगर ये नहीं बोले, if India does not recognize Tibet's historical independence, then India cannot validate India's control over Arunachal Pradesh.
Good point. You have a good point.
Yes.
You have a good point. See, like when you were arrested in the Tibet, your words at the border were like, if they ask me of my, if they question me of my freedom, I will curse them, and if they devoid me of it, I will stab a dagger through their eyes. So like your aggression, your craziness for your country, it is like absolutely beyond words. Like I have no words to describe the courage you have. So how can others also feel that same sense of purpose in living a life? Literally living a life for which you're willing to get a bullet for. Like you can take a bullet for what you're living for. Yes. How can others also feel the same thing? Like how can others also fight for a reason or a purpose which is bigger than their own lives? Living with that much fire which you have. What would you say?
Well, people live for different purposes, and for me, freedom is, my goal, and for which this life is nothing. It's a absolute submission. आत्मा एक पूरा जिंदगी जो है देश की आज़ादी के लिए एक आत्मसमर्पण है, वो किया, then आपको कोई अहंकार नहीं है, मेरा ये है, मेरा वो है, क्योंकि सब देश के लिए हैं, देश की आज़ादी के लिए हैं. And the freedom of Tibet is completely your life of goal of life, and that is the purpose you want to live for. So you are only a servant to that goal and the purpose.
How do you think God has been helping you? Like, do you think you feel that God is with you in this journey?
See, Tibetan माइंड में, या when we say बुद्धिज्म में, ऐसा एक गॉड नहीं है जो दुनिया को चला रहे हैं या जिन्होंने दुनिया को बनाया है. But what we can look at is the general goodness of humanity and people's support beyond national interests, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan people, especially our Tibetan culture, has actually achieved a lot of well wishes from around the world, and I think that is helping and supporting us. Otherwise, we have no exchange of oil or uranium or anything like that, or even borders. There is no way we could exchange anything like that. So if there is any support today, it's because people have found so much of love and compassion in the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They see that Tibetan religion and culture is so relevant to the globalized world, and therefore there is so much of well wishes for Tibet and Tibetan people's desire for freedom.
Sir, my question is regarding His Holiness Dalai Lama, which Tibet got influenced by Buddhism in 18 and 30 AD or something, and then whole culture started forming of around Buddhism. Then we come to more in the related. In 1911, the Sinhai revolution went on and ROC is born. So at that time, जो भी Dalai Lama थे in Tibet, they says that we are a small religious and independent nation, right? उसके बाद 1949 में माओ जेडोंग की revolution होती है and then PRC is born and everything. 1950s आते हैं, रेडियो में announcement होती है और माओ जेडोंग बोलते हैं कि 1950s का गोल है to liberate Tibet. And at that moment, the 10th Panchen Lama, I just want to explain the audience कि Panchen Lama is, according to the hierarchies, the second comes under the His Holiness. So what their statement is, fortunately China has been liberated and central people's government has been established. We are all excited. The liberation of Tibet is just around the corner. On the behalf of the entire Tibetan people, please accept my supreme respect and support. This is their statement. उसके एक साल के बाद PRC डिक्लेयर कर देती है full sovereignty over Tibet, or they use this statement to state the facts, like this is your Dalai Lama said, so we declared sovereignty. उसके बाद I don't know if people know, but 2 of the Panchen Lamas are appointed by the Communist Party of China, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm anywhere wrong, you can correct me. Okay. So one of the Panchen Lama, Gyatsen Norbu, they says Tibetans must be grateful to the CCP, right? And then I read in the website, I think, of the 14th Dalai Lama statement, which says, we are not seeking independence, but meaningful and peaceful autonomy. So my point is, how do you think Tibetans will get united if there's like so much controversy going on in the spiritual leaders which they look up to? So how do you think Tibetans should come together, and how should they go towards this path?
Well, this question composed of many other facets, and I'll try to explain bit by bit. Firstly, when we talk about Panchen Lama, His Holiness the Panchen Lama, the 11th Panchen Lama, at the moment is missing.
Okay.
The Chinese government disappeared him in 1995, and since then we have no idea where he is, what condition. China has been saying that he's fine and he doesn't want to be disturbed, and things like that. But ever since 1995, we only have one picture of him when he was 6 years old. That's all that we know about. And talking about Gyatsen Norbu, this is the little boy who was installed by the Chinese government as Panchen Lama. And in a way, he's a puppet, religious leader created by China in the name of the Panchen Lama. So people of Tibet, both inside and outside, we have no faith in such a person. And we all understand that he has been created as a puppet, just in the name of Panchen Lama. and China is using this very boy, taking him everywhere. Now, of course, he's a grown up adult, 32 or 33 years old. So that is the situation. So whatever statements he make about either about Tibet or China, whatever, we have no regard to it, and does not represent Tibet or Tibetan people in any way. Now you are also talking about China nominating or selecting previous Panchen Lama reincarnations. Now that's a different game, and we need to understand. You see, China as a country itself was under foreign occupation for almost about 250 years. In 1911, China emerged as a free and independent country after overthrowing the Manchu rulers who ruled over China. So this is one very important history people in India don't understand. And I will say that many even government officers also don't understand this. They buy one Chinese narrative that is a contiguous dynasties from Yuan dynasty, which is a Mongolian dynasty, Ming dynasty in between, then Qing dynasty, which is Manchu dynasty. It was Manchu, it is not Chinese. But if you look at this as a contiguous single narrative of Chinese history, then you end up recognizing Mongolian empire as Chinese, or Qing, which is Manchu empire, as Chinese. That is the problem. And unless India is able to analyze and distinguish each of these dynasties separately and recognize China as having emerged as a free and independent country in 1911 and 1912 as the first government, Republic of China. Unless India does this, India will always remain colonized by Chinese narrative. And this is very important. I want to say this to every audience of yours in this. And if possible, you should do a separate show just on this. Emergence of China as a free and independent in 1912 after the Xinhai Revolution in 1911. If you do this, you will do a huge favor to the people of India in understanding the real China. Now, during the Qing Dynasty, when the Manchus who were ruling over China and also having had a relationship with a very unique relationship with the Tibetan people, the Qing Empire had a relationship with the Tibetans, just like how the Tibetans had that kind of a relationship with the Mongols earlier. The Mongols were giving Tibetans military protection, and Tibetans were giving Buddhist teachings to the Mongolians. It's what is called the priest and patron relationship. Mongolians were our patron, Tibetans were priest to the Mongolians, and that is continuing even today. Look at all the Mongolian Buddhist leaders. They were all trained by Tibetan monasteries. Even today, Dharamshala, Sera, Drupung and Gandhi, three important and big monasteries in Karnataka Tibetan refugee camps. These are the places where Mongolian students are coming, studying Tibetan religion, Buddhism, philosophy, dialectics, traditional painting, and also arts, architecture, and Tibetan medicine. Mongolians are studying, and we are giving this kind of teaching to them. Even today, it's continuing. They used to come to Tibet, and now that His Holiness the Dalai Lama and some of the most important institutions are here in India, they come here. Similarly, Chinese students are also coming to India to study from the Tibetans, because we have received Buddhism from India in the purest form, and we have experimented. So much of scholarship has gone into this, and this is what we are sharing to the rest of the world. So it's a very unique priest-patron relationship between Tibetans and the Mongolians, and later Tibetans and Manchus. That was the time when, with the Mongolians, for example, the 4th Dalai Lama was a Mongolian. And therefore, when Panchen Lama and the Karmapa used to be teachers in Manchuria, Manchus, not the Chinese, Manchus. Manchus, they gave Tibet military protection and we gave them Buddhist teaching. At that time, they were able to play a role in nominating the Panchen Lama. Again, it's not Chinese, it's the Manchus. See, if we understand this historically, then we will actually know that the real China emerged only in 1912. And there was nothing Chinese about Manchus.
Yeah.
So that kind of look at the relationship. Today, India is giving military protection to Bhutan. Can India say Bhutan is part of India? No, Bhutan is free and independent. It's just that we have India and Bhutan entered into a relationship where Bhutanese military protection is given by India. And yet Bhutan maintains its own sovereignty. You see, this is important to understand the unique relationship between the Tibetans and the Manchus and the Chinese. Now, the last point, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been saying we are not seeking independence. It doesn't mean he doesn't want independence. If we paraphrase his sentence, yeah, he's not saying I don't want independence. He's saying we are not seeking independence. It's a choice what you're seeking.
Why?
Why? Because the entire world is trading with China. Entire world is taking advantage of Chinese occupation of Tibet at the cost of the Tibetan people suffering. The entire world is benefiting. And for His Holiness the Dalai Lama to maintain this freedom struggle in such a difficult time, including India. Even today, India says, Tibet Autonomous Region is a part of People's Republic of China. So when the host nation itself does not give you any kind of support, then how do you forget about future? How do you maintain the movement? Therefore, my view is the reason why His Holiness the Dalai Lama said we are not seeking independence and what we want is genuine autonomy within People's Republic of China is a tactical way to survive in such a diplomatic politics that is going on around the world. In such a tight situation, the least we could get is like how President Obama or even George Bush, who used to say that China must speak to the Dalai Lama, he is not seeking independence. Even in Indian Parliament, there was one point where the Indian member of Parliament said that the Tibetans are not seeking independence, because if Tibetans sought independence, then India could be put under pressure by China to shut down the exiled government. So, in order to survive, we stopped calling the Tibetan government in exile as government or in exile. We started to say Central Tibetan Administration. This is to remain congruent with the government of India's One China policy in order to survive. See, Dekho, when you are undergoing a difficult time, you have to manage things. It does not, and still not giving up on the idea of independence. And this is again my take. So, I think what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has done is he has designed policies with which we could maintain our movement through this difficult time, and still not giving up on the idea, a possible idea of independence. That space is still there. And His Holiness has always said the final decision will be made by Tibetan people. He's been leading the movement for the past 70 years. And after him, or even later period of His Holiness, there may be times where China will change from within themselves. China's relationship with the international community, which is already undergoing change. There may be possibilities where there is window of opportunity for us to seek independence. Who wouldn't want independence? Who would want to remain part of another country as occupied country? Who would want? किसको गुलाम हमेशा पसंद रहेगा? नहीं. और जिस तरीके से हम जो मूवमेंट चला रहे हैं, इट्स नॉट दैट हमको गुलाम पसंद है, नहीं. एक मजबूरी है टू सर्वाइव. सो मुझे लगता है कि दिस इज ओनली अ सर्वाइवल tactic, and still leaving space for independence when the future generation of Tibetans will make that kind of a call for themselves. And I'm someone who had always spoken for the independence of Tibet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, we were talking about how China is trying to, ethnic cleansing. They
Yes.
use this
Yes.
word. So I was researching about this, and they have been doing this since Xi Jinping gave a speech in, I think, 6 to 7 months prior, in which he said China was united 5,000 years ago, and he's trying to create that narrative. एक चाइनीज लोगों के दिमाग में एक बात डाली जा रही है कि हम तो 5,000 साल से यूनाइटेड थे, बट हमें तंग किसने किया? द डच, द ब्रिटिश, द फ्रेंच. ये लोग हमारी कंट्री में आके इन्होंने हमें तंग किया, तो इसलिए हम डी यूनाइटेड हुए या कुछ हुआ. बट हम तो शुरू से यूनाइटेड ही रहे. देयर इज अ स्टोरी दे आर ट्राइंग टू क्रिएट. और माओ ज़ेडोंग की भी यही सेम फिलॉसफी थी थोड़ी सी, कि वो भी यही करते, वन नेशन वन कल्चर एंड एवरीथिंग एल्स नीड्स टू बी शट डाउन. इफ यू आर नॉट अ कम्युनिस्ट, आई विल किल यू. लाइक दिस वाज हिज आइडियोलॉजी. Like when they invaded Tibet, 1 million people, as you said, were killed. 6,000 monasteries were demolished. Same they have been doing with in the Xinjiang province with Uyghur Muslims. They have what they are doing. They are demolishing the mosque and they are building it the way Chinese structures are built. So no people coming from outside, they won't see if it's a mosque or anything.
No tombs.
Yeah, they are not. They are completely changing it. They are taking Tibetans, they are taking Uyghur Muslims, small children, and putting them into hostels and boarding schools and trying to teach them Mandarin and everything. Just what the main thing is, they are using that same imperialism philosophy, which weaponized history, which the Britishers used in terms of us, and they tried to rule 250 years. The same they are using to control over full China and Tibet and Hong Kong and everywhere. So how do you think Tibetans can, get out of this and preserve their culture and their traditions and, fight this way, this mindset war that is going on with China? How do you think Tibetans can?
Well, your question is about Tibetans, but I think the question is not about the Tibetans. The question is about how the Indians would look at this, how the world international community would look at this. As far as we are concerned, or even Uyghur, East Turkestan people are concerned, or even Mongolians, we know very well our history and how separate and independent we had been. And there were moments where we fought each other. Mongolians ruled over China. Mongolians had that kind of a influence on Tibet, or Manchus ruled over Mongolians. That kind of a crisscross occupation, invasion, and troubling each other as neighbors. That always happened. We always knew about it. Now, what Xi Jinping is trying to do is create a new narrative within China and to the outside world.
Yeah.
And that needed to be countered. See, when China invaded Tibet in 1949, what they were saying was that Tibet needed to be liberated because it's a feudal society. Because there was imperial influence from the West. 2 reasons. Mao Zedong's reasons. If the first reason, that it was a feudal society, it was an aristocratic society, then after invasion, after liberating Tibet, it is now free. Then they should go back, if they came to Tibet for such a purpose. And if they thought it was Tibet was under Western imperial influence, then they too had been liberated. Again, they should go back. But they're not going back. Later they came out with, now that Tibet had been liberated and from feudal society and also from Western imperialism, they created another reason to stay on, and they started to say Tibetans love the liberation, Tibetans are developing, now Tibetan people have their own land. Such kind of narratives started to, they started to say this within Tibet and within China. So Tibetan people were made to act that they are grateful for the liberation. They were made to say things on radio, on television, that they are grateful. In fact, you will see in many, in the 80s, 90s, you will see many hoarding boards set up by the government of India, set up by the government of China, that Tibetans are grateful to China for liberating them. They used to set up that kind of propaganda hoardings. Once people started to understand this, then they started to come out with a new narrative that Tibet had always been a part of China. Not only Tibet, Manchuria, Mongolia, East Turkestan. And they used to go beyond. That they started to, if you actually look at any of the historical documents or books, you will see that when the Chinese were fighting for freedom from the Manchus in 1911 till 1912, every slogan, every protest used to be, let us throw out the foreign yoke out of China. They were looking at Manchurians as foreigners who were ruling over China. And 100 years of Chinese humiliation, a century of humiliation is what the Chinese say.
It's called
and that's because the foreigners ruled over China. The new narrative, what they are trying to create is that there was a corrupt Chinese leader. Now, this is the new narrative, that the corrupt Chinese king, and he was dethroned, and the nationalist a new government came about. So it was now about corruption, not about foreigner who ruled over China. See, China is changing its narratives over many years. Now it has come to a point where Xi Jinping is saying that we are a composite country of one singular narrative history for 5,000 years. So this is how China continues to create its own image and a narrative, and at least India cannot be fooled with this. India must look at Chinese history compositely, and it is important for Indian students to understand the real history of China. How China lived under, firstly, Tibetan rule in the 10th century. Then the Mongolian Empire, 12th and 13th century. Then under the Manchus in 16th and 17th and 19th century. So you see, constantly China had always suffered this.
China has always
and that's why the Great Wall of China was created. The Great Wall of China was created to protect the Chinese from the Manchus, Mongolians and the Tibetans. Great Wall of China was their border. Ek namuna nahi hai. It's not a monument as it is seen today. It was their border. आज उस border को पार करके they are ruling over Manchus in the northeast and to the north Mongolians. What many of our Indian friends don't know is how big China is, and I need to give you the data. Today when we look at China, we are looking at two composites, the land territory and the sea territory. The land territory is 96 lakh square kilometer of land, 9.6 million square kilometer of land. In that way, China is the third largest country.
Yeah.
No, not third, fourth. First is Russia, second is Canada, then United States, and then China. So China is the fourth largest country. 9.6 million square kilometer of land. Out of that 9.6 million square kilometer of land, we will now go by data. China has occupied Tibet, East Turkestan, southern Mongolia in 1949. China invaded Tibet and all these countries, but consolidating China's control over Tibet took 10 years. And Tibet is 2.5 million square kilometer of land. If you actually imagine the map of India, from Ladakh, from Karakoram region, all across the Himalayas down to Ladakh, Himachal, Uttarakhand, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, Arunachal, right down to Burma border, on the entire other side is Tibet. Most Indians have no idea of this. Yeah. So it is important to know that Tibet is 2.5 million square kilometers of land. Two-thirds of size of India. And yet the population is very small because it's a cold desert. Yeah. It's a cold, like how it's a hot desert in Australia or a cold desert in Greenland. Tibet is a cold desert. It's a wind-swept, 9 months of winter, 4,000 meters above sea level. In much of Tibetan plateau, there is not a blade of grass that grows there, like how Nehru said. And there are no trees there. So human habitation is so very less. That is Tibet. And then comes East Turkestan, which China says it's Xinjiang, where the Uyghur people live. It's 1.8 million square kilometer of land, 18 lakh square kilometer of land. Much of it is desert, real desert. Taklamakan desert is there. There, China is mining natural gas and oil. From Urumqi right up to Shanghai, there is a direct pipeline. And this is how they have not only colonized, they are mining, and they are killing the Uyghur Muslim people there. They have banned the Uyghur Muslim people to for men to keep beard, women to wear burqa, all sorts of things happening there that there's no proper media report. Tourism also not allowed there. So therefore, the reports have come that 1 million Uyghur people are kept in concentration camps. This is East Turkestan, 1.8 million square kilometer of land. Then to the east is southern Mongolia. When we understand Mongolia, Mongolia used to be one point of time one of the biggest empires in the world. Then after Second World War, what is called the Outer Mongolia is free and independent. Even today, it's free and independent as a democracy. Okay. What is called the Southern Mongolia, or what China says Inner Mongolia, is under Chinese occupation. And this land is 1.2 million square kilometer of land. 12 lakh square kilometer ka area hai. And this is richest in uranium. China is mining uranium and oil from Inner Mongolia. Inner Mongolia, by geographical area, it's a grassland. Hundreds of kilometers of grassland. Thinly populated. Now so much of Chinese population there, because they created railways into Mongolia much earlier. They were able to create railways into Tibet in 2006. They created railways into East Turkestan because of this southern Mongolia much earlier. So they were able to colonize area and mine. Then Manchuria. Manchuria, which used to rule over China for 250 years, is under Chinese occupation today. It's broken up into 3 provinces: Heilongjiang, Jilin and Liaoning. 3 provinces. Some of the most important industries are based there. Manchus, who used to be a different country, culture, language, people over there have forgotten their culture, language and history. Manchus don't speak their language today. They become absolutely Chinese. There may be, some scattered population who may be still speaking their language, but they've lost their sense of identity and culture. This, at one point of time, was one of the biggest naval forces in the world. They used to send their ships from there all the way to South India. Their ships used to go to Kerala and to Tamil Nadu for trade and exchange. So when Xi Jinping went there in 2019, when Tamil historians talked about their relationship with China, it was not China, it was Manchus. Different people, different culture, different language. So you see, that is 84,000 square kilometers of land. All these 4 occupied countries put together make 60% of China's landmass. China is 9.6 million square kilometer, 96 lakh square kilometer area. Unme se 60% is occupied country.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the map of China, you will see to the east is China, to the west are the occupied countries. And occupied countries ka population jo hai is not even 5%. 95% is Chinese. Only 5% are the population of the occupied countries. But 5% of the population, 60% of the land.
Yeah.
And this is from where the natural resources they exploit to make cheap made in China products and sell it to the rest of the world. Now this is only the land territory. Let us look at the sea territory, what is called the South China Sea. South China Sea is contested by almost about 26 different countries in South Asia. Everybody is saying, ye hamara hai, but China has bullyingly ruled over that. And a couple of years ago, there was a case made at the International Court of Justice. China lost the case, and yet China, as a bully, still ruling over 9 million square kilometer of sea area. And there, they have not only created artificial ports, artificial islands where they have created airstrips for their fighter jets. These countries, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, they are not able to fight China. Japan, Singapore Islands, so much of problems. So all this is happening because most of the countries, they wanted to not be confrontational with China in order to maintain their trade. And that appeasement policy has created China into the monster China is today.
Right. Do you think the Uyghurs, the Taiwanese people, the Hong Kong, the people of Hong Kong, and the Tibetans, if they collectively come together and fight the Chinese, do you think it is possible for them to collectively act as a group and then fight against China?
So at the moment, at the moment we have created an alliance of the China occupied countries and China threatened countries. So activists from the outside. So we have activists from East Turkestan Uyghur people, Southern Mongolia, Chinese democracy activists, and Hong Kong activists, Taiwanese activists. We come together, we do a joint protest in Paris and Toronto, Brussels, Berlin, London, New York, DC, Taiwan, Tokyo, and many of these places. We come together and protest. But these are more just symbolic protests than anything concrete or a larger movement. But that is needed. And if any country, whether it's the United States or European Union countries or India or any of those countries, if they truly look at China as a threat, this is a possible platform to work from. Because we are threatened by China. Our very survival as a country and people, we are threatened by China. And if United States and many of those countries also look at China in similar ways, it's time to work together.
If you are locked up in a room with Xi Jinping, what will you say to him?
I think there's. I mean, firstly, it's just a hypothetical situation.
Do you think he can be influenced by your talks? This is what I mean to say.
I don't think so. You know, Xi Jinping, our lives are so very different, and a person like him, you know, it would be even condescending to say that I would want to talk to him or change him or anything like that. Yeah.
Like there is a very famous quote of Martin Luther King. He says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Yeah. So, what's your take on this?
It's true, especially now when it's a globalized world, when every problem is everybody else's problem. Agar, you know, Kim Jong-un is doing something funny there, it will affect India's trade or politics. If something happens in Galwan Valley, then countries around Asia, around the world are affected. If one leader and anyone in the West does anything, so similarly, a freedom movement is an opportunity for others to see how their freedom is not infringed upon and how they could come together, an opportunity to rise for peace that they speak so much for. But what is happening now is that around the world people keep talking about peace, but when they act they just do reverse, only for power and money.
Sir, what is the significance of the red band that you are wearing? And point number 2, what is the functions of the foundation that you have found, Friends of Tibet?
Well, मैंने बचपन में एक प्रतिज्ञा किया था कि जब मैं बड़ा हो जाऊंगा तो मैं अपने देश की आज़ादी के लिए काम करूंगा.
Okay.
और अपने देश के आज़ादी की काम से सिवा दूसरा कुछ नहीं करूंगा. उसी पे मैं पूरा ध्यान दूंगा. So this is a pledge I made when I was in school. I was in 5th standard. I must have been 10 or 11 years old. So I understood that my life is for the freedom of my country, and for that I need to educate myself, I need to empower myself, my sense of critical analysis, my sense of reading, my sense of building relationship with people, my education, my understanding of global politics, and my speaking and reading power. So throughout my schooling, I was constantly empowering myself to make myself worthy for the cause I have taken the pledge for. So I had always wanted to be a writer, to speak and write for Tibet. But after graduation, that whole idea changed. So I wanted to go to Tibet and fight and die. And when that did not work, when I was thrown out of Tibet, I settled for the second option, which was to work from exile for the freedom of Tibet. And then, of course, the work is very different. If I were in Tibet, it would be confrontational. It would be there and immediate results. But working from exile, you are working for Tibet from this distance. And then the language and action are more symbolic and communication in nature, advertising in nature. So I turned myself into an advertisement to represent Tibet freedom. So I started to wear this band to say I am committed for the freedom of Tibet. So initially people didn't understand. They were thinking it's just a style statement or something like that. But I continue to wear. I've been wearing it since 2002. Abhi 20 साल हो गया.
20 हो गया.
It has now come to a point that at least from within the Tibetan community, when they look at me, they immediately say Phörangzai, which means Tibet ki azadi, Tibet's freedom. Natural word immediately that comes to mind when they see me. So I think in 20 years I've been successful in making myself a symbol of Tibet's independence. Even when I go to school, Tibetan schools, har bacche bolenge, looking at me, they may not know my name, but they'll say Phörangze, Tibet's independence. In that way, I'm successful in a small way, because I wanted to be that symbol. And with this, it becomes a constant reminder, but at the same time work for independence of Tibet every day. So my promise is, wearing this band, is until Tibet regains independence, I will work every single day and never stop. And once Tibet becomes free and independent, I'll take this band off and then become a subject or citizen of free Tibet. So this is the promise I've taken, and I'm working every day.
Is this the same reason why you never got married, maybe? Or are you married?
No, I wanted to keep this focus, undivided focus on my work. So therefore I've kept myself away from wealth building, career building, or power or family. I've kept myself away from all those. So I live very simply, down to just 2 pairs of clothes. I have 2 shirts like this. I have 2 jeans like this. I wear them in turns. So you see, when your needs are very small and simple,
focus,
then you can maintain that focus, and your energy, your whatever little money you have, it can go into the struggle. And in order to feed myself, I've been selling my writings. Of course, my writing is not just to make money. My writing is a genuine expression of how the Tibetans are undergoing. But by publishing books and selling them, 50 rupees a copy of my book, that gets me some money with which I can pay for my food, my travel, my room rent, electricity bill, and all of that. So it's a small, simplified life. And I believe that simple and simplified, minimal life is a great source of joy. The more you have, the more you would want, and the more unhappy you end up becoming. I've seen many of my friends in that circle. So in that way, I've been successful up until now in maintaining a very simple, minimalist life, with which I can dedicate my time, my energy, whatever I know, my skills for my work. So I've been doing this. Yeah.
So, sir, we have a ritual in our podcast. What we do is, whoever we do the podcast with, we end the podcast with asking a question that the previous podcaster gave.
अच्छा.
So हमने last podcast किया था Joint Commissioner Mr. तसीम लाल जी के साथ. तो उन्होंने एक क्वेश्चन लिख के दिया जो आपसे हम पूछेंगे. उसको क्वेश्चन था कि how do you love people?
Like, how do you make love to people? Like, affect your feelings. I'm not saying like in a bad sort of way.
So, yeah, for me, I'm someone who is very easy to make friends with. I immediately, quite quickly, I trust people. And unless it may be a very different kind of a situation and a context, I very quickly make friends with people. And I would like to believe in what people say and how they present themselves. At least from my side, I'm very pure and clean in that way. So my intentions because I see that every individual has so much of skill, so much of things to learn from different people. And it's always a joy to find people who do things very differently. And I love when I am challenged spiritually, physically, intellectually. When I'm challenged, I find great joy in this, because I see that there is something not enough. There is something more to do. When I find someone who is, I'm not good in mathematics or accountancy, but when I find someone who is extremely intelligent in those, I like to ask more questions about maybe economics or science, technology, IT is something I don't understand at all. But when I see someone, I always have so many questions to ask, trying to understand what is the psychology of the language of the machines. I like to understand, and this helps me for my own growth. So I make friends quite easily, and I like to believe, and this is how I love people.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir, for this great podcast we have. I love to have a chat with you. Or this is if you would love to write one question for our next guest, it will be great.
I mean something to
Whatever
you.
question you want, we'll ask the other guests.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And any question which is very close to your heart.
Next page.
Here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just sign below.
Ha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
आज 4 तारीख है.
Yes.
So my question is, how do you deal with misunderstanding, criticism and hostility, especially from your loved ones?